Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr, where we talk about the art and culture of running an independent record label. And today, we have an interview with a record label called Lobby Art Records, and I'm very excited for you to hear this conversation. We talk a lot about manufacturing and making great, valuable, tangible, exciting products. We talk about obi-strips. We get into a lot here. I'm very excited for you to hear it. Thank you so much for being a listener. Thank you for our new patrons who have just joined. And by the way, you can always become a patron by going to patreon.com/other record labels and get all of our bonus episodes, including my extended interview with the folks from Lobby Art. You know, another thing I wanted to bring up that I think is really cool, we just came up with a new micro course. And so if you're not familiar with our online courses, you can learn about them on our website, otherrecordlabels.com. They're very helpful, they're very popular. And this new format that I launched back in October is single subject online courses. So they're basically tackling one subject at a time, something like music publishing. We have a great music publishing course that goes very in depth, really shouldn't be called a micro course. We also tackle web design and social media. And we just came out with a new one called Spotify Basics, which is this introductory course and kind of going over the 101 of streaming best practices and building a playlist strategy for your record label. Anyway, there are more micro courses in the pipeline and a lot more that are going to be released later this year. Very excited for people to engage with those. Go to otherrecordlabels.com/courses to learn more. So great to talk to you guys. Thanks for doing this, by the way.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Thanks so much for. I'm glad it worked out to connect. I know we've kind of emailed back and forth a little bit over the past year or so. So I'm glad it's coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really nice to go through your catalog and you know, it just, I get the sense that like the label's a little bit different than the normal label, and so I always enjoy that because like there's just, you know, questions just kind of come to me instantly by looking through things, and so excited to chat with you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Let's roll. I gotta ask you, because you know, as I was going through your Bandcamp, and I'm listening to things, I find it, you know, personally, I find it so hard to promote non-vocal music, instrumental music, and I love ambient and instrumental stuff, and I know that's not all you do, but speaking of instrumental music, like as a fan, I buy a lot of it and collect a lot of it through labels I follow. But as a label or an artist releasing experimental, non-traditional stuff, I just find it really hard to communicate its value when it's so subjective. Do you find that to be the case?
You know, I think for us, we, you know, and to whatever success it ends up playing out as, I think we do think kind of deliberately about, you know, what sort of narrative could be pulled from, you know, a particular album, and obviously with instrumental music, ambient, drone, you know, other forms or formless music, if you will. You know, of course, you're not working from a kind of a traditional narrative, a lyric-driven or storytelling narrative in that sense. But it, in some ways, I appreciate the quality of it being a bit open for interpretation, and seeing how it sits with different people is a pretty exciting process for us. You know, because I think people have their own ways of, you know, for some, I think listening to an ambient record, for instance, is a very intimate and solitary experience. It's, you know, home on a rainy day kind of music, or it's, you know, studying, you know, while they're reading or something. And for other folks, it's a communal activity. It's a way to gather around and kind of experience a particular, you know, depth of listening that one wouldn't perhaps in a kind of in something that contains lyrics. So I think if we, for how, you know, again, I don't know to what success that we've been able to do it, but I think that if we can articulate that it's open for, you know, people to experience, then we're doing our job.
I I really like that answer. I mean, I think that's interesting that talking about pulling something else out of that. And so, are you talking about necessarily maybe a story of the album or a story of the artist, or is that through the packaging or the visuals or something? How do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even so. I think what's neat about it is in terms of storytelling, it's not necessarily like, oh, this is the breakup album,
Yeah,
and it explores this, or but thematically, I think the different sorts of I'm thinking about the recent ones we've done, the Old Saw record or the Dylan M. Howe record. Both have particular environments that I feel that they induce, and I think through craft, it obviously starts with us getting some wave files, and then it's building out what it will look like, how it will exist in the world from there. And for us, that's thinking through the design, the
sure.
packaging, and the kind of writing that we do around the album to kind of make a little home for it of sorts.
Are you guys involved in that process, like most of the time with your artists? Like you talk about, and I have a lot of questions about the packaging and design later on. But I'm curious about. You said you get wave files. How often, out of say 10 records, are you actively involved in helping the artist design the album cover and the whole package?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think we both really love labels that have a really distinct aesthetic feel for them.
Yeah.
And whether that's like a uniformity across releases, or if it's just I think of like I know we had listened to your podcast with Geographic North, and I love just hearing about their how they conceptualize their releases. But then like a Revenge International has, they don't have like a uniformity necessarily, but there's a particular feeling that comes from it. So we're never trying to impose, a really strict aesthetic code onto any release. Every release, if someone's coming to us, we really put it to the artist first.
Okay.
In terms of what sort of ideas, images come to mind, but we also emphasize.
And then we also kind of like, workshop it together,
Right.
and come up with some sort of like aesthetic, cohesive vision about it. And I feel like it's one of the most fun parts of the process, like the artwork and all of this. So and so far we've done that with every single release. It has been like a collaboration with
that's
the artists
awesome.
and us. Yeah, I think it's very important.
I feel like in this genre, more than other genres, this music is art, and it really ties together with. And maybe I'm just being biased, and I'm just projecting my own feelings about this type of these type of sounds. But I feel like the music is art, not to dismiss rock or rap or pop, but maybe just because it's often abstract, that it reminds me more of visual art. And so I love that marriage of the packaging and the visual art with this.
Yeah, absolutely. We feel that in a way the artwork is the first way that you kind of like interact
Yes,
with
that's
the
true.
object and with the music. So I think it's a very, very good first impression, and it kind of like leads to however you will end up absorbing the content.
Do you have a genre per se? I mean, you talked a little bit about how you do not impose a certain, design style or a template, which I I'm on the fence. I love when labels do that, but do you have a genre? Like as I was listening through things, some of it sounded the same, and then some things kind of struck me as a little bit different. So how do you kind of find a commonality between the artists musically?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the tenure of the label, and we've been kind of doing, we're a slow operation. We're not putting out, handfuls of releases every year, but I think the through line for a lot of the material that we've put out is first and foremost the relationship that we end up forming or deepening with the artists, and that all kind of underscores what we feel as the kind of thematic consistency of sorts, like the way we are relating to our friends and artists who are we're working with. And then I think that because you'll look back on some of the releases and it kind of genre hops a bit. There's kind of left field synth pop stuff. There's, some songwriters stuff that maybe trends a little more folk oriented. There's kind of real like dark ambient things. And but I think if I could kind of identify the quality that's there is that there's to me a very homespun feeling to everything that's being done. Nothing feels particularly overproduced, and I guess that's kind of a guiding ethos is and hopefully it comes across also in the the artwork and packaging in terms of just hopefully cultivating a warmth from the artist through the release. So like it's I think you can even look at the last two from Old Saw and Ben Varian. I mean, those are pretty distinctly different sounds. But there's a real like generous spirit in both of those albums to me, and I can listen to them back to back in a way that's
what I've always noticed about record labels is that you guys are the curators, and for you, it makes sense to have experimental pop next to ambient drone, or just traditional songwriting, and you as music fans enjoy those together, and so it totally makes sense that there will be fans who have no problem listening to folk music next to experimental music.
Yeah, I mean, I think about our own music tastes, our record collections, or our the music. I mean, both him and I are musicians and artists in our own right, and I think we're always thinking about how we are integrating different processes or prompts and sounds that get us into new territory. So I think it would be hard for us to kind of, stake out a camp in one particular, one particular area. It would kind of leave us feeling like stale creatively. So that kind of leads us to, and like, for whoever kind of finds a connection with the music that we put out, hopefully it's, it may be that someone likes one record and not the others. I mean, but for those who are, hopefully there's something there for a wide audience.
You talked a little bit about this kind of, handmade feel, this homespun idea. How do you establish a brand in your mind? What kind of things do you want to be known for as a label?
Yeah, I guess I like. I guess I come back to this kind of idea of warmth and generosity. It's not. I've spent a few years working in different facets of the music industry, and then working with a few different labels. And I guess I've initially kind of picked up a lot of knowledge or inspiration about how to run a label from this label that I worked with while I was in college in Portland, Oregon, called Home Tapes Records.
Okay.
Sadly, I think they're kind of stopped put out material, but it was run out of their house, husband and wife, and they ended up having some pretty big success with some artists, but they're it started really with very homemade kind of aesthetics and principles, and from a kind of a DIY hardcore scene, and then but the care that they put into every facet of the release, so it made it, I couldn't really imagine just like uploading songs and a random JPEG onto Bandcamp and saying, here's our next release,
Yeah.
It takes, I think, so hopefully what comes across in terms of a brand or as an aesthetic is that like every corner of the release is being considered. So that,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
and hopefully it's, hopefully it's both. And I guess it's a delicate line between like making sure that, our imprint is kind of, our thumbprint is on this,
Yeah.
the release, but
Yeah.
also that the artist is being, lifted up and being seen as like, this is their work. And we're kind of, hopefully coloring the edges a bit.
Can you tell me about the origins of the label? How did this all begin?
Yeah. So it started in, let's see, I guess
2015?
2015
I
or
would
so.
say,
Yeah.
Okay.
We were living in Portland, Oregon, and I'd been involved in the music scene there for some time, and different bands, and then started to put out my own material. And I think as a lot of labels kind of start, it's someone who's sick of sending demo submission emails, and so I was like, hey, I should, I know I have a little bit of know-how from the labels that I interned and worked with, and then it was also, I think the real inspiration came from it was a collaborative effort, seeing that Jimena and I started to kind of work together on the albums.
That's great.
Yeah, so we wanted to, I wanted to have kind of like some sort of like art studio where I can create my pieces, but at the same time, I was very interested in music. And so it was also a way of trying to connect and have a project together. And yeah, it turned out really, really good just because we are both we love music so much and we both love art so much. So it ended up being like a nice...
What was the plan? What was the strategy of marrying visual art with the music? How did you plan to do that?
Well, the first releases were, my music, and Jimena made the artwork for the albums, and it started. And then like, I was just like, whoa, this is like, we were starting to see like some sort of connective tissue between the music and the visuals. And then also for me, it was a fun process to see someone who was seeing this other, for me, I felt I didn't have much of a, know-how when it came to visual art, and to see someone's brain work in a way that was like, oh, I'm seeing this to represent, I see this reflected in the music.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
That sort of was a...
Right. And for me, it was the same thing, kind of like on the opposite side. It was like, oh, I see this, like I'm not a musician, but
Right.
I would, come up with like ideas or concepts or images, and that's how I would look at it. And yeah, I think that
That's really good to have that type of, to have that type of partnership. I think that's huge.
Yeah, and then obviously and then I think as we started to recognize the kind of work patterns that we had, and that we could start to envision like, hey, what if this we branched this out and started to incorporate the work of others, and what would it be like for us to start to cultivate a bit of a visual identity with other music that I'm not generating. And then that was, and then, we had, been in, arts and music communities in Portland for some time at that point. And, friends whose material that we thought was really special, but not necessarily getting released or getting
Sure.
much, notice in the town, we were like, well, hey, what if we did a release for this? And so it really started from that small little bud. And again, it tends to operate in the same way that it did back then. It's just hopefully we're a little bit, we have a little bit of a tighter idea of what we're doing.
Looking at one of your releases, Old Saw, which has such a beautiful packaging, and I love the obi-strip. I'm a huge fan of obi-strips. I've never done one myself, but I love the look that you have of these. But it looks like it did really well. You sold out of the vinyl according to Bandcamp, and it has rows and rows of supporters on Bandcamp. What's the key to the success there?
Yeah, it took us a bit by surprise.
Yeah.
This was so prior to this release, our only vinyl releases we had done were these kind of really limited 50 editions of 50, where we were hand stamping, records and hand assembling the jackets and so forth. So for this was, us kind of branching, saying, okay, hey, we think this could kind of maybe be a success, but not really knowing. Henry Birdsey, who's the kind of main composer in the group, is part of this other really terrific group called Tongue Depressor, this duo out of New Haven, Connecticut. And I know, they kind of definitely have, their fans, and there's a pretty big support for them in the Northeast, particularly. So it was, it was a bit of a shot in the dark, but it was also, I think, we approached it in a patient but really diligent way of, how we were, again, the same process of like, how is it going to look, and what's the kind of narrative, or how are we crafting the verbiage around it, and then hopefully, with in terms of press and distribution, those are just, again, we don't work with a press agency or anything, so it's just over the years we've maybe got some write-ups here and there, and just kind of always sending out an email never hurts, and so fortunately some of those came through, but the success of it selling out so quick, I mean, it sold out within a week of it being released, which is just kind of wild. And we were fortunate to kind of connect with a few great shops and distributors who wanted to carry it both abroad and in the States. And hopefully that means, I think the way it's worked so far is that, every little relationship, even if it's just an email with a writer or a shop, is that for the next release, that's someone someone we can connect.
Yeah.
Hopefully they know who we are now.
That's so true. Yeah. It builds up over time. Talk to me about the manufacturing process, because I heard you say stamp, and I think I saw on Bandcamp that these were these records. Part of it was handmade. Is that correct?
Yeah. So right, we had the kind of initial run. Or we had the full manufacturing run of records, but we wanted to do kind of true to our our form of having a handmade component. We offered we had another 10 test pressings made that we started. It was funny. There was kind of two album design phases. One for the the manufacturing that took place at the plant, and one for the handmade edition, where we were able to kind of go a little wild and work with different paint. We painted on the on the covers and the inner sleeves, and
we played around with color as well.
Yeah,
it was really fun to kind of like have this other side of the same product.
Okay, so the pink version then was done at the pressing plant, like normal. Correct. Printed.
Yes.
I see.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you use the test pressings, 10 of them.
10 of them to kind of like experiment and
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we use that as the opportunity to, as well, like to I think something that's also really tied up in how we're thinking about what we're doing, and kind of the act of sharing music as a kind of as a form of community building. We wanted to kind of start to initiate some sort of practice of, well, what would it look like for us to try and integrate that within our releases. And so we were kind of coming up with this concept of a donation tier. So, we used that as we used the handmade test pressing edition as a campaign of sorts to, generate. We were shipping those out before the release date.
Oh,
so
cool.
People, so people who wanted to get it could get the record, a month in advance.
How much sooner? Like how much earlier than the release date?
Yeah, like at least a month.
Yeah, sure. Because you get them nowadays. You get them like 4 or 5 months, 6 months even before the album's done.
Yeah, and so it was a way, for those who'd be interested.
Very cool.
And we, so the price was a bit higher, and we made that so there would be a donation that we kind of for each release, we work with.
A charitable donation, not to the
charitable donation.
I see, not just to the artist. Okay, so they're
not just
they're
the
at
artist,
a fixed price then.
Yeah, so we put this up so the retail for the regular record was $18, and so for the donation tier, the test pressings, we put it at $38. So that's $18 for the record and an additional $20 donation that was placed to the Pioneer Valley Workers Center. And then we also emphasized, if you want to contribute more, all the extra dollars past $38 would go towards a donation as well. So and then we also did a percentage of the retail sales that we donated to the same organization. So the whole release actually came out to us being able to donate $500 to the Pioneer Valley Workers Center.
That's great.
Which is it makes the whole endeavor feel like it's a little bit less secluded in the music sphere of things, and a little bit more of hopefully connected with the communities we find ourselves in.
Well, I want to just highlight this for a second, just in case our listeners are dozing off. But like, there's 2 very cool things that I'm hearing here, and I hate the fact that Bandcamp takes a cut of these donations. I think that sucks. It's too bad there isn't a way to kind of say, hey, listen, the majority of this money is going to charity, but whatever. But what I'm hearing here, I love so much is you doing something with the test pressings is something I'm a huge fan of. And so creating your own artwork, because test pressings don't come with artwork, that is so cool. And then this idea of selling a higher priced record that has a donation component, because the artist and the label's still getting their normal share, but then the extra, I think that is so genius. And I mean, that can even be done with like taking 20 out of the normal pressing and maybe have them autographed or including an extra bonus or something, but saying, hey, these are actually $10 more and this goes to charity. That's so genius. I hope more people do that. That is so cool.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're really, really excited about and want to continue doing.
I love that. I love that. That is so cool. So 150. I mean, the other thing that's making me very amazed and jealous is that you sold out of 160 copies in 2 weeks. That is insane.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Great.
That and then that was so fortunately we were able to get some distribution. Like I said, just through shops, and so the pressing was finished with like 280 copies. So we were able to get about 100 and whatever it was, 120 of those distributed. And then we were shipping out the remainder, and so our house was overtaken for a few weeks there of mailers and stuff. But yeah, again, like it was a surprise, a pleasant one, no doubt. We were kind of wondering if whenever you're in doing records, you wonder if you're going to end up with boxes of records for years. And
Oh, totally, for sure. I want to ask you, and by the way, this Old Saw record is very, very good. It reminds me, we have an artist on our label, Mike Grigoni, who is now on Taylor Dupree's record label at 12K. But I love that like Americana ambient. Ambient is always synthy, but like for this to be kind of like acousticy and pedal steel and lap steel, I thought that's really cool. You have this, when we're talking about quantities and selling out, you have this finite amount of physical products on your store. And actually, if you go to merch on your Bandcamp and you look around, the majority of what you have is sold out. And I've talked about this before on the show with other labels. On one hand, when a label's catalog sells out quickly, it's a sign that they're doing something right and have created this scarcity that we all kind of hope to have with our releases. At the same time, it can also be really disappointing for a music fan like me to go to your site and be out of luck. So a part of this question is, and also does it limit your revenue potential if you had done more? So how do you balance that as opposed to having infinite inventory? But still having this limited edition that is so great with art. Talk to me about that thought process.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a magic. I don't know if there's like a magic kind of solution to that because, right, in some ways maybe, speaking from this very, small operation here, maybe obviously bigger labels have that stuff dialed in. They know their audiences. They probably have some metrics about, how many records they know they can sell of a particular artist. But there's a little bit of, it's you're dancing a bit with, how many you think you can move. And I definitely have that same sensation going to a Bandcamp of a label I love and seeing it's all sold out and just being like, damn, like if I had only gotten there sooner. So I think for us, what we're thinking through in terms of scarcity and abundance is again, like to the best of our ability, striking that, sweet spot where, that it's going to be made available. But, for us, it is a financial, there are financial considerations about, we've been asked a bunch about repressing this record.
Yeah.
So it's just like a consideration about like, in terms of having a successful release and then investing that money into a repress or a new project.
And what are your thoughts about that?
So I think for us, things are fluid and can always change, but we are, I think, excited always about, the next project. Mm-hmm. But we also don't, and I say this also from, experience, on the side of making music is, you always, records that came out a year, 2 or 3 years ago that you still feel good about, you still want to have, like people being able to find some sort of, a copy of sorts or some way to engage with it. So we're currently thinking through different ideas, particularly with the Old Saw release, to keep the lifespan of that record going without maybe necessarily having to press up another vinyl run.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that could be, anything from, we're gonna have some shirts coming out pretty soon for it that we're pretty excited about the design, and then different. Yeah, I think it just kind of opens up a wealth of possibilities in terms of keeping the lifespan of an album going, while also being able to set your sights towards the next project and have the funding to do so.
Well, that's a really good mindset, and actually, and I agree with you. I think when you sell out in 2 weeks, I would be tempted to repress. So I can't say exactly what I would do, but I do love. This happened to me this past fall where I made a record and I had it on tape originally, and the vinyl was delayed, and then. So the tape kind of got all of this attention, and then the vinyl arrived, and then the vinyl got all this attention, and then people were asking for CDs, and so I made CDs, and so it ended up stretching in the release kind of out for 3 months, and I totally love what you're talking about, and so now it's kind of like, well, let's do shirts, and then that keeps the release alive. So yeah, I love that, because I really think a lot about, drawing out and celebrating a record for longer than just that one day.
Yeah, that's
Right.
great to hear about
Yeah.
the success of that album for you. I mean, I think that is, I think for artists and label alike, you just really, I mean, when you're, I'm trying to create a good analogy, because, it's in some ways it's like, having a child of sorts, because you're like, and you're not just there for the infant stage. You're hopefully there to see that, to hopefully have that be, some sort of timeless piece, for both you and the artist and the label. And and then to have continued interest in various formats. I mean, man, kudos, hats off to you for being able to get so much interest across formats.
Well, I really can't take much credit, because really it was this accidental. Had I been planning, I would have had all the formats ready on release day. But now looking back, I almost feel like, moving forward on future releases, I would almost intentionally stagger formats. I don't know if that would piss people off. I'm not sure, but I do love the idea of saying, and now we release this, and now we release that. I kind of feel like it's almost like it becomes a journey now of this, as
Right.
opposed to like one release day.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know where I
think-
sit.
Yeah. I mean, and I think particularly the way also like the press cycle works, which tends to, I don't know, not really have much of a lifespan. It just puts the onus on, again, the label to kind of breathe life into it, because typically, right, some sort of press outlet is usually not covering
No.
stuff that's not right, fresh and
Oh,
new
yeah,
right
for
away.
sure.
So yeah.
What are your individual roles? I mean, I see both your names on the website. Do you guys have individual gifts at the label, individual roles, silos that you either enjoy doing or that is your responsibility?
Yeah, I think there are, inevitably there's things that right get kind of compartmentalized and separated. I think I definitely end up dealing with a lot of the manufacturing stuff, production, distribution, from kind of having a history of working in that world and having some understanding of when test pressing issues come up, for instance, knowing that that's part of the game, and that it's is something to be worked through. Jimena definitely gets involved a lot with the artwork.
Yeah, I tend to leaning more towards the artwork, kind of like the layout, the concept, color theory, and all of those things.
Yeah, and Jimena has a background in different packaging design and craft.
Oh, cool.
And so when, if we're kind of conceptualizing some sort of idea and I'm scratching my head about like, well, how do we make that happen? Or how does this get produced? And then Jimena's like bringing out the cardboard, the scissors, the paint, and kind of like workshopping it. And,
Okay, let me ask you, Jimena, about the obi-strips, because I see at least 2 records where there's this transparent seal, and I love these things. I haven't gotten a record in a long time, and I have never done one myself. I definitely am going to do one. As I'm looking at your website, I've decided I'm going to do one the next time I do a record. And
They
I
look so
especially love
good.
yours because they're translucent.
Yes.
Can you talk to me about that process? And did the plant do that for you?
The plan, yeah,
Okay.
they did that for us. The obi thing is something that we very much like you have been always been attracted to, and we've seen it in specific releases. We love that it is see-through kind of like transparent vellum.
So
and
cool.
it gives it like such a nice, finish detail. It's kind of like a makes it like a present, like a ribbon.
Yeah,
And
right.
so, yeah. And so with that, we also kind of like are trying to kind of like to be like a little bit of a seal of what lobby art is, kind of like having the logo there always and a specific type of layout and design.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the parts that we get really excited about, like adding the obi. I think it makes the whole thing very special.
Okay, let me ask you 2 questions. Number one, okay, so I'm just looking at here. You have the lobby art logo. It looks like you have a description of the album. Is that right? Like a paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of like in lieu of a hype sticker or something.
Yeah.
It's kind of put it there. Yeah.
And then the artist name and the title, and then the reverse side of it, I'm trying to look on the website. Is it track listing and like basically credits?
Yeah.
Yep. Track
Okay.
listing, credits, and then at the bottom we on the where the flip side of the logo is making note about our kind of donation to your policy. Not policy because that seems like a weird word to apply
Yeah.
to it, but practice.
This is a lovely package. But so 2 questions. One, does the music fan generally keep these on? Like, is underneath is it cellophane, like poly wrap, or like what is it? Because some fans will just tear it off, throw it in the garbage. But I would keep it on, right?
Yeah, the intention is for it very much to not be a throwaway.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually it's under, so it comes affixed to the jacket itself, and then the poly bag, whatever goes over it.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So it's very much meant to, so you can take it off. It's a snug fit, but it's definitely meant to be a component
It's very
of
intentional.
and that's why the writing on the writing on there is less so like a traditional maybe marketing sticker where it's like including some sort of press quote, and actually it's like more of just it's like part of the narrative that we're kind of attaching to the kind of a little bit of like a couple sentences that hopefully
It's a little more sophisticated than like a
it could be one word, but hopefully I capture someone's eye and explains a little bit about what's inside.
Subconsciously, it's telling people, do not throw this away.
Do not, please don't throw it away.
There's a lot of information.
It costs about as much as the jacket.
Okay, so that's my second question: is how much does it cost? Is it $1 more? Is it $2 more?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously the vellum stock is more in traditional paper stock, so it costs a little more. It comes out. I think it was essentially equal to the record cost of the record.
Wow.
So I don't know what it, compared to a marketing sticker, it's probably about $1 more. Yeah.
Okay.
Per unit,
So,
yeah.
so if you were, okay, so let's just say for easy math that the records were $10 a unit at that cost. Would it be before the obi strip? Would it be $1, $2, $3 to add an obi strip? Like what percentage?
Yeah, it would be. So it'd be. Well, let's see. I'm trying to think about it in terms of the cost per unit for this one. It was like $1.50.
Okay, that's not bad. That's worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And for us, I think, in a dream world, we could have the finances to do like, a gatefold tip-on jacket with all the bells and whistles. But that stuff, ends up being $4 a unit or something. So this is like a hopefully a way to have a special packaging, printed quality to it but doesn't break our bank either.
And I guess, so did you say that the translucent paper is like a little bit more expensive than if it was just normal paper?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But now is black and white giving you a discount, or does that not matter?
It'd probably cost a little bit more for full color
Okay.
printing on that, but I don't think it'd be much. The stock is, I think, the primary cost there.
What I love about this too, and I know that my listeners they're still with us because we're getting really granular here on obi-strips, but that's what this show is about. Where else would you talk about obi-strips? But what I love about it, especially the way I'm seeing you use it, and on the old Saw record, is that it's part of the design. Like without it, there's no artist name on the album cover, right? When you pull it off. So there it is. It's part of the design. I love that. And same with on the back. There's no track listing on the back. So it really opens you up artistically to do something very unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think for us, and this is something I feel like I took away from my experience with Home Tapes, the label I worked with, is a lot of their stuff had, it was very minimal in terms of text. And it really honed in on, the album cover as, being a piece of artwork, right? That's, and then the text, the artist name or something may appear on a sticker or some other component.
Love that.
But right, this allows us to kind of use the OB as a canvas for text, and then the album jacket as a canvas for image, essentially. And then they can be in conjunction, they can be seen together or separate.
This is so great. So let me ask you, what's next for the label? If everything was in your control, what would you like to be doing with the label in the next year, 5 years, 10 years?
Wow, that's really good. We're always, it's kind of, we're always figuring it out, I guess.
Always figuring it out. I mean, we're definitely excited to continue. I think one of the things that we've talked about a little bit is kind of like how to perhaps enhance the experience of the album. We've talked about perhaps including like a piece of sculpture or perhaps a scent that can accentuate the experience of listening. So yeah, we've had conversations around that. Nothing terribly solid, but ideas are flowing. And I think that's something that we would be very excited to experiment, just having this additional aspect to it. And yeah, I feel like we both are very curious about materials and art and different ways of expression. And I think I can definitely see us do that anytime soon.
It seems like there's such an appetite for that in the digital world for all of these physical experiences of music, and maybe even more so now with less live music happening. But I know that like when I get a record in the door and it comes with an obi-strip and it comes with a color vinyl and stickers and something like a lithograph or a booklet, I'm eating it all up. I just, the more the better.
Right. Is that little extra that kind of like warms your heart a bit more.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Also, this is crazy that you'd only charged $18 for that record. No wonder you sold out.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Well, I think that's also something, that is what, we're thinking through. Because vinyl, like, it can be really cost prohibitive. And, if I had my way, so another label that we've taken a lot of influence and inspiration from is Mississippi Records, who we used to live down the street from in Portland. Okay. And they sell their motto is love over gold. They kind of have as a shop as well. And so they sell their records. They'll do a gold foil tip on and sell the record for $12, which, they probably clear like $2 on that record. But, I think for both us and the artists that we work with, like it's about finding that line. So it's, where it feels like friends and family and the stranger, who'd be interested in it, would feel like they're getting something that's not gonna, they're not gonna have to pay $30 for it. But it's going to be enough where the artist and label can kind of, make, make what they need to make to kind of continue through with their.
Well, and that, the pricing of a record is, on one hand, I think that fans need to understand how expensive the record is, and special variants and obi-strips, how that all adds up. Shipping is a nightmare, and then that's not to say, that's nothing to doesn't even include the mixing and mastering, and then paying the artist for a career. So on one hand, I totally agree that. On one hand, I totally feel like fans need to pony up $50 for this piece of art that they're going to keep for the rest of their life, hopefully. But at the same time, it's so great when you keep them in mind and do something that opens them up to be a little bit more spontaneous with buying a record when it's $16 or $18.
Yeah, and I think that's something that as we kind of continue to ideate about future releases and different presentations, as Jimena mentioned, incorporating different handmade elements that would, because I think we're also clearly advocates for compensating artists and really acknowledging the labor that goes into every facet of it. So if we can kind of provide something that feels like we really put our blood, sweat, and tears into in a certain way, and have that be reflected in the cost, but also have it be at an entry point where it's like not going to turn people away. Again, everything's like trying to find a sweet spot, and
right.
It's and we don't. I don't know if there's I think hopefully with each release we're actually like kind of reconceptualizing what that is,
right,
given whatever the release ends up being.
This kind of the topic of pricing brings me to my final question, and it reminds me of the very first interview I did, very first episode on this podcast was with a label in Chicago called Trouble in Mind Records, and they actually have always priced their records very cheap. And in record stores, which they've done intentionally, and I think is great. But the question is, what was interesting about that label is it was a husband and wife, Bill and Lisa, who run that label, and they had this thing that was so fascinating to me, where they would only sign a band to the label if they both loved that record, and they both had to 100% buy into that record. And I'm wondering, do you have that same kind of arrangement that we can only release something if you both are equally excited about it? Is that true for you guys?
That is true. Correct. Yeah, absolutely. That's how we work. Yeah, we both have to be very, very excited about it. And
I mean, the amount of times we listen to a record, like the amount of times we've listened to the Old Saw record when we were working on it, or the amount of times we listened to the Ben Varian record, it's like every day that stuff's being played in the house, and so
that's great.
We better both like it, if it's something we're going to be working on together. So that's not So there's definitely a process in terms of listening to stuff and being like, hey, how are we feeling about this? But we both kind of have to agree on it.
Yeah, and we usually do. Like there hasn't been a time in which we've really wanted to put out something, and I was like, oh no, like we are for the most part agreeing on what comes out.
Well, and that's and I mean that's good, because then if something doesn't work, then that other person would be like, I told you so. You have bad taste.
Right. It's kind of avoid that conflict by just making sure that it's agreed upon from the get-go, and we share in the follies and share in the celebrations.
Yeah, the bad taste conversation never goes well.
I have a little bit more. I'd like to dive in for our patrons if you have a few more minutes.
Sure thing.
Thank you so much for doing this. You have a very cool label, and you have a very cool process, and you've had some incredible success. I am envious, but I'm also wouldn't necessarily want to be in your position, because the next record has a lot of pressure to live up to.
Right. I thought about that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words, and hopefully whatever pressure there is will, I don't know, not to think of it so much
Yeah,
as pressure, but
just keep doing what you're doing.
It'll be a treat.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our guests from Lobby Art for being on the show. To learn more about this incredibly special label, go to lobbyartrecords.com, and then you can link to their social media as well as to their Bandcamp to check out some of their releases, and I think they have something coming out very soon. So make sure you support them and check them out. Also, I have an extended interview with them that we recorded that is coming out ASAP. And so if you'd like to hear that and continue on with all of the fun, please consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/otherrecordlabels, where you hear this extended interview of this, plus all of our Artists on Labels series and all of the cool things that is only accessible to our patrons.